Snow fell so thick it erased the world entirely. The mountain wind howled across Iron Pass like the voice of something ancient and hungry. On every tactical map in Colonel Warren Hadley's command post, this narrow corridor through the Rocky Mountains was marked with a single word that every soldier understood. Impossible. Lieutenant Nathan Reese crouched behind the smoking wreckage of a supply truck, watching his breath freeze into crystals before it could dissipate. His fingers had stopped feeling the cold an hour ago. That was a bad sign. When you stopped feeling, you started dying. Around him, what remained of Bravo Company huddled in whatever cover they could find. 51 soldiers, down from 112 when they'd entered the valley that morning. 61 men and women who would never see another sunrise, their bodies already disappearing beneath the relentless snow. The mountain walls rose on either side like the bars of a prison cell. Vertical sheets of granite and ice that no human being could scale. The pass itself was barely wide enough for two vehicles, a natural choke point that should have been scouted properly, should have been cleared before they moved through. But intelligence had been wrong. The domestic terrorist cell they were hunting wasn't a handful of extremists with hunting rifles. They were professionals, former military, well-equipped, and they'd been waiting. Enemy fire came from 3 positions. Reese had counted them in the first hour, before the snow got too thick to see clearly. 1 sniper position on the western ridge. The elevation advantage was so extreme that anyone who moved in the open was dead before they heard the shot. They'd lost 18 soldiers to that single rifle in the first 30 minutes. 1 heavy machine gun nest built into a cave system on the eastern cliff face. Maybe 200 meters up, the arc of fire covered the entire valley floor. Every few minutes, it would open up and rake across their position, forcing everyone flat against the frozen ground. 1 mortar team somewhere behind the northern bend of the pass. They couldn't see them, but they could hear them. The whistle of incoming rounds, the crump of impact. Every 8 minutes, like clockwork, another explosion would tear through the snow. The math was simple, brutal, absolute. Stay here and they'd freeze to death by nightfall. The temperature was already negative 25 Celsius and dropping. Try to retreat through 3 kilometers of exposed trail, and the sniper would pick them off one by one. Call for air support that couldn't fly in this weather. The storm had grounded every helicopter within 100 miles. Or push forward through a kill box that had already claimed 61 lives. Reese pressed his radio. "Command, this is Bravo Actual, still pinned at the throat, requesting emergency extraction." "Over." Static crackled, then Colonel Hadley's voice, distant and distorted. "Negative extraction, Bravo. Weather's getting worse. No birds can fly until this system clears." "How long, sir?" 18 hours minimum, maybe more." Reese looked at his ammunition count. 3 magazines per rifleman. He looked at the wounded soldiers wrapped in thermal blankets that weren't enough. 12 men and women who couldn't walk. Another dozen who could move but wouldn't last long. 18 hours was a death sentence. "Copy that, command. Bravo Actual out." The machine gun opened up again. Rounds punched through metal, sprayed ice chips from the rocks. Someone screamed. A medic scrambled toward the sound. Above them, invisible in the storm, the sniper waited, and the mountain continued to claim its payment. The command post was a shallow cave carved into the southern approach to Iron Pass, 15 kilometers from where Bravo Company was dying. Colonel Warren Hadley stood over a map table lit by harsh LED lanterns, surrounded by officers who looked like they'd aged 10 years in 6 hours. Major Douglas Webb spoke first. His voice was flat. "We can't extract them. We can't get artillery support through this weather. Air assets are grounded. We can't flank because the terrain won't allow it. The only path forward is through that kill zone, and we don't have the firepower to suppress 3 fortified positions simultaneously." "Then we're discussing acceptable casualties," Hadley said. "Not tactics." "Yes, sir." Hadley studied the map. Red markers indicated enemy positions. Blue markers showed Bravo Company's location. The gap between them was less than a kilometer. It might as well have been the Grand Canyon. He was about to speak when Webb interrupted, his voice hesitant. "There might be one option. It's not conventional, and I'm not sure I believe it myself." "Speak, Major." Webb pulled out his tablet. "I put out a request to every attached unit within 100 kilometers. Asked if anyone had a specialist who might attempt a solo approach, someone who could make the climb, neutralize the positions from above. And I got one response. From a liaison officer at Fort Carson. He said there might be someone, a sniper, young, female. She holds every marksmanship record at Fort Benning. Captain Morris made a sound that might have been a laugh. A range queen? That's your solution? Sir, with respect, shooting paper targets is not the same as... I didn't ask for your opinion, Captain. Hadley turned to Webb. What else? The liaison officer said this sniper was trained personally by Dalton Mercer. The name landed in the room like a grenade. Hadley straightened. Ironside? He retired 5 years ago. Yes, sir. But according to this liaison, Mercer has been quietly training this woman on his own time for 3 years. Off the books, passing on everything he knows. Hadley considered this. He'd served with Dalton Mercer during the first Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm. He'd watched Mercer make shots that physics said were impossible. The man was a legend. Where is she now? She arrived at the base 20 minutes ago. She's waiting outside. What about Mercer? He's with her. Send them in. Sergeant Kira Brannick stood at attention in the entrance of the command cave, snowflakes still melting in her dark hair. She was 27 years old, medium height, with features that were striking rather than beautiful. High cheekbones, a jaw that suggested stubbornness, and eyes the color of winter sky, pale gray, that seemed to calculate distances even as she stood motionless. Behind her stood Master Sergeant Dalton Mercer. He was 58 years old and looked it. His hair had gone steel gray, cropped close in the military style he'd worn for 35 years. His face was lined with wrinkles that came from squinting through scopes in 100 different climates, but his eyes were still sharp, still measuring. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing left to prove. Colonel Hadley studied them both. Sergeant Brannick, you've been briefed on the situation? Yes, sir. Her voice was steady, controlled. And you believe you can do what 3 squads of experienced soldiers couldn't? I believe I can try, sir. Trying isn't good enough. We have 51 soldiers dying in that pass. If you fail, we lose you too. Kira didn't flinch. I understand that, sir. Do you? Have you ever killed anyone, Sergeant? Have you ever fired your weapon at a human being who was trying to kill you? No, sir. Captain Morris stepped forward. Sir, this is insane. She's a range queen. Paper targets don't shoot back. I didn't ask for your opinion, Captain. Hadley turned to Mercer. Dalton, you came out of retirement for this. Why? Mercer spoke for the first time. His voice was low and rough, like gravel over sandpaper. Because she can do it. You're sure? I've been training shooters for 35 years. Rangers, SEALs, Delta operators, men who wrote the book on precision shooting. He paused. She's better than any of them. Morris made a disbelieving sound. Mercer turned to look at him, and something in the old man's gaze made the captain step back. I said she's better. I don't say things I don't mean. She's 27 years old, Hadley said. No combat experience. Nothing on her record except training scores. Training scores that break every record we have. And she's got something you can't teach. Mercer's eyes found Kira's. She's got the gift. The gift? The ability to be calm when everything around her is chaos. The ability to wait when every instinct screams to move. The ability to make a shot that physics says is impossible because she doesn't know it's impossible. Silence filled the cave. 3 years ago, Kira had been nobody, a fresh graduate from sniper school with impressive scores and zero respect. The men in her unit called her Range Queen behind her back, sometimes to her face. She was good on paper, good in controlled conditions, good when nothing was at stake, but nobody believed she could be good when it mattered. Then Mercer had shown up at Fort Benning, retired, legendary, looking for something no one understood. He'd watched her shoot for 3 hours without saying a word. When she finished, he'd walked over and said 5 words that changed everything. You have the gift, come. For 3 years after that, she trained in secret. Weekends, leave days, any moment she could steal. Mercer had pushed her beyond anything the Army demanded, made her shoot in rain, in snow, in heat that turned the air to soup, made her wait for hours, days, until patience became as natural as breathing. The gift is nothing without discipline, he'd told her once during a brutal winter exercise in Wyoming. Talent gets you noticed. Training keeps you alive. She'd believed him. She still did. Now she stood in a cave surrounded by men who thought she was a joke, and Dalton Mercer was the only person who knew the truth. Hadley asked, "What's your assessment of the mission, Sergeant Brannock?" Kira's eyes moved to the map on the table. She studied it for 15 seconds, her gaze tracking lines that only she could see. "The sniper position is the linchpin," she said. "He's the spotter for the mortar team, the coordinator for the machine gun. Take him out and the defense falls apart. The machine gun has a limited arc of fire. The mortar team is firing blind without corrections. If I neutralize the sniper, I can work on the other positions from elevation." "How long?" 5 hours to reach a viable firing position. The weather's getting worse. Then I should leave now." Hadley held her gaze for a long moment. He was looking for doubt, for fear. He found something else instead, a certainty that reminded him of Mercer 30 years ago. "Approved. Get your gear, Sergeant. You leave in 10 minutes. As Kira turned to go, Mercer stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. He reached behind his back and pulled out a rifle case. Long, black, unmarked. Inside was a weapon that Kira recognized immediately. A custom-built rifle chambered for .338 Lapua Magnum. The barrel was longer than standard, the stock worn smooth from years of use. Every surface showed the marks of countless missions. "Old friend," Mercer said. "She's been with me since Desert Storm, Bosnia, Afghanistan, a dozen places that don't officially exist." He held out the rifle. "She's yours now." Kira hesitated. This rifle was more than a weapon. It was a legend. "I can't take this." "You can. You will." Mercer's voice was firm. "I've been waiting 3 years to give her to someone worthy." Kira's fingers closed around the rifle. It fit her grip like it had been made for her hands. "Trust what I taught you," Mercer said. "The wind will lie to you. The cold will lie to you. Your fear will lie to you. But the math never lies. Do the math. Take the shot. Come home. And if I don't come home, then you fail. But you won't. I've never been wrong about a shooter." He paused. "Not once in 35 years. Kira slung the rifle across her back. "I'll see you when it's done," she said. Mercer nodded once. "You will." Kira walked out of the command cave and into the storm. Behind her, Colonel Hadley turned to Mercer. "You really believe she can do this?" Mercer watched Kira disappear into the swirling white. "I believe," he said slowly, "that we just sent a ghost to kill ghosts. The approach would take hours. Kira knew this before she started. Frozen rock, hidden crevasses, wind that could knock you off a cliff face. Visibility measured in meters. Every step was a calculation. Every movement was a risk. She'd done climbs like this before. In training. In exercises that Mercer had designed specifically to push her past what she thought she could endure. This was different. This was real. But the technique was the same. 1 foot in front of the other. 1 handhold at a time. The first hour was the hardest. The slope was gentle enough to walk, but the snow had drifted deep, up to her waist, sometimes higher. She moved through it like water, finding the path of least resistance. The temperature was still dropping. Her breath came out in clouds that froze before they dissipated. Mercer's voice echoed in her memory. "Cold is just information. It tells you something is wrong. It doesn't tell you to stop." She didn't stop. The second hour, the slope got steeper. She pulled out her ice axes. Drive the pick into the ice. Test the hold. Pull yourself up. Repeat. Below her, the pass had disappeared entirely into the storm. Above her, the ridge was still invisible. She was alone in a world of white and gray and howling wind. Exactly where she needed to be. Halfway through the third hour, she found a small plateau, a shelf of rock barely wide enough to lie flat. She stopped there, catching her breath. Rest was tactical. Push too hard and you made mistakes. Make mistakes at this altitude and you died. Quietly, alone, forgotten. She checked her hands. The right one was starting to lose feeling in the fingertips. Early stages of frostbite. She flexed her fingers inside her gloves, forcing blood flow. ignoring the pain. Pain was data, nothing more. Data could be processed, ignored, overcome. She was about to start climbing again when her foot slipped. The ice broke away without warning. 1 second she was standing on solid rock. The next she was falling. Her left hand shot out by instinct, ice axe finding purchase in a crack she hadn't even seen. The pick bit deep, held. Her body swung out over the void, legs dangling over a drop that disappeared into nothing but white. For 5 seconds that stretched into eternity, she hung there. One hand, one axe, one chance. The void below her was absolute. White fading into gray, fading into nothing. If she let go, they'd never find her body. She'd just become another story. Another cautionary tale about overconfidence and impossible missions. Part of her wondered if it would be easier to just let go. No more proving herself. No more fighting for respect she shouldn't have to earn. No more carrying the weight of other people's doubts. Then she heard it, distant, almost lost in the wind. The rattle of the machine gun, the crump of mortar fire. People were dying down there. 51 soldiers who had families, futures, reasons to live, and she was the only one who could save them. Kira Brannick did not let go. She looked at the rock face, found a crack to her right, small but deep enough. She swung her body, building momentum, and drove her second axe into the crack. It held. Now she had 2 points of contact. She found a foothold, then another, pulled herself up 1 agonizing inch at a time until she was back on solid ground. For a long moment, she lay flat on the rock, breathing hard, staring up at the gray sky. Her arms were shaking. Her legs felt like water, but she was alive, and she wasn't done. Kira pushed herself up, shouldered her rifle, and continued climbing. 5 hours after she left the command post, Sergeant Kira Brannick reached her first viable firing position. It was a crevice between 2 massive boulders, sheltered from the wind, with a clear line of sight to the western ridge. She crawled into the gap, settled her body into the snow, and became part of the mountain. The rifle came out of its case. She assembled it by touch, not looking. Fingers finding each component through muscle memory, built over thousands of repetitions. She loaded 5 rounds into the magazine. Not 40, not 20. 5. Because 5 was all she would need. The scope showed her the world in shades of gray and white. She panned across the terrain, reading it like a book written in snow and stone. And then she found him, the enemy sniper. He was dug into a position on the western ridge, maybe 400 meters away, elevated another 50 meters above her, protected by rocks on 3 sides, with only a narrow firing lane open to the valley below. Through the scope, she could see details, the barrel of his rifle protruding from his hide, the careful professional arrangement of his position. She checked the database in her memory. The intelligence briefing had mentioned a name. Viktor Kozlov, former Russian military, Spetsnaz, now a mercenary, 40-plus confirmed kills. The name hit her like a physical blow. Viktor Kozlov. She knew that name. Everyone in the sniper community knew that name. 3 years ago, he'd killed 4 American advisors in Syria with 4 shots from over a kilometer away. The intelligence community had been hunting him ever since. Mercer had shown her the file once, had made her study Kozlov's methods, his patterns, his weaknesses. Someday, Mercer had said, you might face someone like him. Someone who's as good as you are, maybe better. When that day comes, the only thing that will save you is patience. He's aggressive, confident. He takes risks because he's never lost. That's his weakness. Exploit it. Now that day had come. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was a test, the ultimate test, the best against the best. Only one of them would walk away. Kira settled into her position and began her calculations. Range, 418 meters. Wind, gusting 30 to 40 kilometers per hour from the northwest. Temperature, -28 Celsius. Barometric pressure, dropping. Humidity, 90%. She pulled out a small notebook, made calculations longhand. Mercer had taught her to do math on paper. Computers could fail. Batteries could die. Mathematics was eternal. The numbers told her the shot was possible. Barely. Possible didn't mean easy. It meant waiting. She settled in. The shot would come when the shot came. Force it and you missed. Accept it and the mountain would give you your moment. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only the scope, the wind, the tiny movements of the target. And then something changed. Through her scope, she watched Viktor Kozlov shift position, watched his head come up, scanning the terrain around him, watching him look directly at the crevice where she was hidden. He knows, she realized. He doesn't know where, but he knows someone is here. The predator had sensed another predator. Now it was a contest of patience, a contest of will. Two snipers separated by 400 meters of frozen air, each waiting for the other to make a mistake. Kira didn't move, didn't blink, barely breathed. Mercer's voice whispered in her mind. The amateur shoots first. The professional shoots last. She was the professional now. She would shoot last. Minutes passed. An hour. More. Kozlov fired twice, ranging shots, testing, looking for reaction. Kira gave him nothing. 2 hours. She had been motionless for 2 hours. The snow had buried her to the point where she was invisible, a white shape in a white world. Viktor Kozlov had stopped scanning. He was back to watching the valley below. Professional arrogance. The belief that no one could match him. The wind was still gusting, but she'd been reading the patterns. 30 seconds of chaos followed by 10 seconds of calm. The calm never lasted long, but it was enough. She waited for the next cycle, felt the wind begin to die, watched the snow stop driving horizontally and start falling straight down. Now, her finger found the trigger, not squeezing, touching. The rifle would fire itself when the moment was perfect. She exhaled half a breath, paused at the natural respiratory rest, the moment between heartbeats when the human body was most still. Kozlov shifted, just slightly, just enough to present a clean angle through the gap in his cover. The rifle spoke. One word, one syllable. A statement of physics delivered at 853 meters per second. The 338 Lapua round covered 418 meters in just over half a second. In that time, the Earth rotated imperceptibly. Temperature differentials created pressure waves invisible to the naked eye. The bullet passed through them all, spinning at 3,000 revolutions per second. Through the scope, Kira watched the round find its target. Viktor Kozlov died without knowing what killed him, without hearing the shot, without understanding that the mountain had finally found someone more patient than he was. She worked the bolt. Smooth, mechanical. 4 rounds left. The thermal signature on the ridge went still. The best sniper on the mountain was gone. Kira allowed herself one moment, 1 second of acknowledgement. Then she shifted her aim to the second position. The machine gun nest was carved into the eastern cliff face. 200 meters of vertical rock separated it from the valley floor. The range was different now, 612 meters. The angle was different. Elevation change of 43 meters. Wind still gusting, but from a different direction. The math changed completely. Kira ran the numbers, made the adjustments, found her new point of aim. The machine gun opened up, raking across Bravo Company's position far below. Long burst, 10 seconds, 15. Through the scope, she could see the muzzle flash, could see the barrel of the gun protruding from the cave entrance. She couldn't hit the operators directly. They were too well protected by the cave walls. But she could see the weapon itself, the heavy receiver group that made the gun function. Destroy the weapon, and the operators became irrelevant. The next burst came. She was ready. The round left her rifle, tracking through the storm, dropping according to gravity's patient math. It hit the machine gun's receiver group at a downward angle, punched through the feed tray mechanism, and turned precision machinery into worthless scrap metal. The firing stopped. Silence from the cave. Then shouting, distant, muffled, angry. 3 rounds left. The mortar team was the real problem. Kira swept her scope across the battlefield. The mortars were behind the northern bend of the pass, protected by terrain. She couldn't see them directly, but mortars worked on mathematics, just like rifles. She'd been counting the rounds for hours, timing them, building a picture of where they had to be positioned. She shifted position, moved 30 meters along the ridge to get a different angle. From the new position, she could see the northern bend. Couldn't see the mortar team itself, but could see something else. A boulder perched on the cliff face above their position. Massive, ancient, held in place by ice and friction and geology. And below the boulder, a wedge of ice that was the only thing preventing gravity from doing what gravity always did. She ran the calculations one more time. 800 meters. Maximum effective range for accuracy. Maybe beyond it in these conditions. She had one chance. The rifle steadied. Her breathing slowed. The world narrowed down to the crosshairs and the target and the space between them. Fire. The round crossed 800 meters of frozen air in just under a second. Hit the ice wedge at precisely the point where stress met structure, shattered it into 1,000 crystalline fragments, and gravity did the rest. The boulder fell. Tons of rock and frozen earth accelerating down the cliff face, building momentum, gathering debris, becoming an avalanche. It hit the ledge where the mortar team was positioned and kept going. The mortars went silent. 2 rounds left. Kira scanned the battlefield one more time. 3 enemy positions neutralized. The sniper was dead. The machine gun was destroyed. The mortar team was buried. The pass was open. Time to leave. She was 200 meters from the secondary ridge when she heard them coming. 4 men, moving fast through the snow, not carefully enough. They'd found Kozlov's body, had traced the shot angle back to her original position. Now they were hunting. She had 2 rounds left. Enough if she was precise. The terrain here was broken, full of crevices and wind-carved formations. Good for defense. She found a position between 2 vertical slabs of rock, a natural corridor that funneled any approach into a kill zone. Then she waited. They came into view 3 minutes later. Winter camouflage, AK pattern rifles, moving in a spread that said they knew what they were doing. The lead man was scanning the ridge with binoculars, looking for tracks. He was good. In another 30 seconds, he'd spot her position. She didn't give him 30 seconds. The round took him in the chest, punched through body armor that was useless against a .338 Lapua at 200 meters. He went down without a sound. 1 round left. The other 3 scattered instantly, dropping into cover, returning fire blindly, undisciplined. Panic fire. They didn't know where she was. She waited. Let them waste ammunition. One of them moved. Quick sprint from one rock to another, trying to flank. She tracked him through the scope, watched him set up for his next move. When he broke cover again, she was ready. The last round dropped him mid-stride. 0 rounds. 2 enemies remaining, and she was out of ammunition. The rifle went back into its case. Even empty, it was too valuable to leave behind. She strapped it across her back and drew her sidearm, a .45 caliber pistol. Then she started moving. The 2 remaining hunters had gone quiet. They knew they'd lost 2 friends in 60 seconds. Fear was setting in. She heard movement to her left. Loud. One of them was abandoning stealth for speed. Let him come. She tracked his progress by sound, the crunch of boots in snow, the ragged breathing of someone pushing too hard at altitude. He was 15 meters away when she stepped out. 3 rounds, center mass. He dropped. 1 left. The last man came around the corner fast, rifle up, ready to kill anything that moved. She wasn't there. She was 5 meters behind him, had circled back while he was focused on the position she just left. The pistol was already aimed at the base of his skull. Drop it. She said it in his language. The man froze. His rifle wavered. She could see his mind working, calculating odds. He wasn't fast enough. He knew it. The rifle fell into the snow. How many more? She asked. No more. We were the only ones who saw Petrov die. She looked at him. Young, maybe 25, eyes wide with fear. Please, he said. I have a family, a daughter. She's only 6 years old. Kira thought about the 51 soldiers freezing in the pass below. Thought about the 61 who'd already died. She thought about what Dalton Mercer would do. Your daughter, she said quietly. What's her name? Anna. Remember that name? Remember what you almost threw away today? She shot him in the leg. He went down screaming, clutching the wound. Not fatal, but incapacitating. Liv, she said, standing over him. Go home to Anna, and when they find you, tell them this. She leaned close. Tell them the mountain takes payment from everyone. No one gets away clean. She turned and walked away, left him bleeding in the snow. The mission was complete. Lieutenant Nathan Reese didn't believe it at first. The machine gun had been firing every few minutes for 6 hours. Constant, reliable. The rhythm of their slow death. And then it just stopped. "Cease fire," he ordered. "Everyone hold position." The silence was wrong. Unnatural. Sergeant Brennan crawled up beside him. Could be a trick. Could be. But Reese didn't think so. Something had changed. First the sniper went quiet, then the machine gun died. And then they all heard it, felt it. The deep rumble of something massive moving on the northern cliff face. An avalanche. Reese watched tons of debris pour down onto the position where the mortar team had been dug in. A disaster so perfectly targeted, it couldn't be natural. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Reese grabbed his radio. "Command, Bravo actual, enemy fire has ceased. All positions are silent. Requesting permission to advance." Colonel Hadley's voice came back, sharp with disbelief. "Confirm, Bravo. All positions?" "Confirmed, sir. The pass is clear." "Proceed with caution. We'll have medics waiting at the rally point." Reese turned to his soldiers. 51 faces. Frost-covered, exhausted. Looking at him with the careful hope of people who'd stopped believing in miracles. "We're moving out. Stay alert. Anyone who can walk helps someone who can't." They moved through the pass like ghosts, weapons ready, expecting the trap to spring shut at any moment. It didn't. Reese paused at the cave where the machine gun had been. The weapon was still there, its receiver shattered beyond recognition. A single shot, perfect placement. Inside the cave, 2 enemy soldiers sat with their hands raised. They weren't even armed anymore, just staring at the walls. One of them started talking as soon as Reese appeared. "The ghost. We saw the ghost. A woman. She came out of the storm, shot Kozlov from nowhere. Then the gun. Then the mountain came down." Reese let him talk. He was looking up at the ridge, trying to imagine the angles, the distances, the impossible sequence of events. One woman, one rifle, one mission. He keyed his radio. "Command, Bravo, actual. Pass is clear. We're coming home." 8 hours after she'd walked into the storm, Sergeant Kira Brannick walked out of it. The command post was chaos, medics rushing in and out, wounded soldiers being triaged, officers shouting orders. In the middle of it all, Colonel Warren Hadley stood like a statue watching the entrance. Kira appeared without warning. One moment the entrance was empty. The next she was there. She looked like death. Her lips were blue. Ice crystals clung to her eyebrows and hair. Her hands, when she pulled off her gloves, were white with frostbite in 3 fingers. She was moving stiffly, her body running on nothing but willpower. But she was standing. The room went silent. Hadley crossed the space between them in 4 strides. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he snapped to attention and saluted. "Sergeant Brannick, outstanding work." Kira returned the salute. Her arm was shaking. "Mission complete, sir." The words fell into the silence like stones into water. Captain Morris stepped forward, the same officer who had called her a range queen 6 hours ago. His face was pale. His hands were shaking slightly. "Sergeant," he said, his voice cracked. What I said earlier." Kira looked at him, really looked. She could see the shame in his eyes, the realization that he'd almost cost 51 people their lives because he couldn't believe a woman could do what needed to be done. "You were wrong," she said simply, "but so were a lot of people. The question is what you do now." Morris swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "I mean the next time someone volunteers for an impossible mission, the next time someone stands up when everyone else sits down, you remember this moment." Her voice was quiet but carried through the entire room. "You remember that you almost let 51 soldiers die because you couldn't see past your own assumptions." She turned away from him, dismissing him completely. The room was silent. Every officer, every soldier, every person who had doubted her stood frozen. Some couldn't meet her eyes. Others stared openly, seeing her for the first time. Not as a woman, not as a range queen, not as someone who needed to prove herself, as a soldier who had done the impossible. Dalton Mercer was standing at the back of the room, half hidden in shadow. He hadn't moved when she entered. He was just watching, the same way he always watched. Kira walked over to him. The crowd parted without being asked. They stood face to face for a long moment. teacher and student, legend and inheritor. You did it, Mercer said finally. You knew I would. I believed you would. That's different. He paused. How do you feel? Kira considered the question. Her body was shutting down from cold and exhaustion. 3 of her fingers might have permanent damage. She'd killed 5 men in the last 6 hours and left a 6th bleeding in the snow. Empty, she said, like I left something up there. Mercer nodded slowly. You did. You left the girl who needed to prove herself, the one who wondered if she was good enough. His voice was quiet. You came back a soldier who knows exactly who she is. And who is that? Someone who can make the shots that matter. Someone who can go where others can't. He reached out and touched the rifle still strapped to her back. Someone worthy of carrying old friend. She's your rifle. She was my rifle. Now she's yours. Mercer's weathered face creased into something that might have been a smile. I've been waiting 3 years to pass her on, waiting for someone who deserved her, someone who would understand what she means. What does she mean? Responsibility. Every shot you take with that rifle matters. Every trigger pull is a choice, a life or a death, a mission completed or failed. His eyes met hers. You proved today that you understand that. Kira was quiet for a moment. Then she unstrapped the rifle from her back and looked at it. At the worn stock, the precision barrel, the scope that had shown her targets most people couldn't even imagine. Thank you, she said, for everything, for seeing something in me that no one else did, for teaching me, for believing in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. Mercer put his hand on her shoulder, brief, almost paternal. Don't thank me yet, he said. Today was just the beginning. The shots will get harder, the missions will get darker, and someday, if you're lucky, you'll find someone who has the gift like you do, someone worth passing it all on to. And if I don't find them, you will. That's part of the gift too, recognizing it in others. He squeezed her shoulder once, then released it. Now go get medical attention before you lose those fingers. Kira nodded. She started to walk away, then stopped and looked back. Mercer? Yeah? The sniper on the ridge, Viktor Kozlov. He was good, really good. But he wasn't patient enough, and you were. Mercer's voice was matter of fact. That's the difference between professionals. Not skill, patience. You did that today. You'll do it again. How do you know? Because I know you, Kira Brannick, better than you know yourself, maybe. And I know that what happened on that mountain today wasn't luck. It was you, the person you've always been, finally getting the chance to prove it. Kira held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once and walked toward the medical tent. Behind her, Colonel Hadley approached Mercer. That was one hell of a thing she did up there. Yes, it was. Are there more like her? Mercer shook his head slowly. Not that I've ever met. The gift comes along once in a generation, maybe less. When it does, you recognize it, you cultivate it, and you pray it ends up on the right side. He turned away from the medical tent and looked out at the storm. Remember her name, Colonel? Kira Brannick, the woman who cleared Iron Pass. Because this is just the beginning. 5 years later, 2014, Captain Nathan Reese stood at a podium in a briefing room at Fort Benning, looking out at 24 young officers. The Iron Pass operation, he said, pulling up a map on the screen. By all conventional analysis, Bravo Company should have been annihilated. 3 fortified positions, superior elevation, unlimited ammunition. We were pinned down with no air support, no artillery, and diminishing combat effectiveness. A young lieutenant raised her hand. Sir, the after-action report mentions a specialist who neutralized the enemy positions, but there's no name listed. Reese allowed himself a small smile. That's correct. Who was she, sir? Classified. How did she do it? The ballistics reports say some of those shots were beyond theoretical maximum range. Reese looked at the map, at the red markers indicating positions that had killed 61 of his soldiers. Impossible is just a word, he said. It means people haven't figured out how to do something yet. The specialist figured it out. He was about to continue when something caught his eye. An envelope on the corner of the podium. Plain white. No markings. That's all for today. Dismissed. The officers filed out. Reese waited until the room was empty, then picked up the envelope. Inside was a photograph, black and white, a mountain pass, snow-covered, taken from a high elevation. Iron Pass, from an angle that only one person could have captured. There was no signature, no note, just the photograph. Reese held it for a long moment, then slipped it into his pocket. She was still out there, still watching, still doing the impossible. 15 years later, 2024. The training facility was unmarked, no signs, no fences, just a gravel road winding into the Colorado mountains and a collection of buildings that looked abandoned from the outside. Inside, Sergeant Cassidy Holt was learning to shoot. She was 24 years old, top of her class at sniper school, record scores on every evaluation. But she wasn't here for instructors. She was here for the woman standing beside her. Kira Brannick was 42 now. The gray eyes that had once been bright with youth now held something deeper, harder. Her dark hair was streaked with silver. Her hands showed the scars of too many close encounters. But her voice was the same, calm, patient. "Again," she said. Cassidy exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The round crossed 600 meters and struck the target dead center. "Good! Again!" Cassidy fired. Another hit. "Your breathing is still off," Kira said. "You're holding it instead of releasing it. That creates tension. Tension creates movement. Movement creates error." "I hit the target." "You did. Today, in perfect conditions, with no one shooting back." Kira's voice hardened. "On the mountain, there are no perfect conditions. There's wind that changes direction mid-shot. There's an enemy sniper who's been doing this longer than you've been alive." Cassidy lowered her rifle. "Is that what happened to you at Iron Pass?" Kira had never talked about Iron Pass, not in the 3 months since she'd started training Cassidy. "That's what happened," she said finally. "And worse, things they don't put in reports, choices that stay with you forever." "What kind of choices?" "There was a man, one of the hunters who came after me. He begged for his life, told me about his daughter. She was 6 years old." "What did you do?" "Shot him in the leg and walked away." Kira's voice was flat. "He's still alive. Probably tells stories about the ghost who spared him." "Why did you spare him?" "Because he had a daughter. Because killing him wouldn't have changed anything. Because sometimes mercy is its own kind of strength." She paused. "Or maybe because I still need to believe there's a line I won't cross." Cassidy absorbed this in silence. "Will I have to make choices like that?" she asked. "Yes." "How do I know if I'm making the right ones?" Kira looked at her for a long moment. "You don't. That's the hardest part. You make the choice, and you live with it. Forever. No one tells you if you were right." They were interrupted by the sound of boots on gravel. A communications officer approached at a half-run. "Ma'am, we've got a situation. Hostage crisis in the Cascade Range. Local law enforcement is overwhelmed. Military is requesting specialist support. Details? 12 hostages, armed extremists, mountain terrain, weather closing in." The officer paused. "They're saying it's impossible." Kira looked at the officer, then at Cassidy, then at the mountains rising in the distance. "Cassidy," she said. The younger woman straightened. "Yes, ma'am?" "How do you feel about impossible?" Cassidy's eyes went wide. "You mean?" "I mean, someone has to go up that mountain. I'm asking if that someone is you. What if I fail?" Kira smiled, the same smile that Dalton Mercer had given her 15 years ago. "Then you fail, but you won't." She unstrapped the rifle from her back. Old friend, the weapon that had cleared Iron Pass, that had completed 47 impossible missions. Cassidy's fingers closed around the rifle. She could feel the history in it, the worn stock that had been gripped by 2 legends before her, the scratches from 100 missions, the scope that had shown Dalton Mercer his targets in Desert Storm, shown Kira Brannick her targets at Iron Pass. 3 generations, Kira said quietly. Mercer carried her for 20 years. I've carried her for 15. Now she's yours. What if I'm not worthy? You're worthy. Mercer knew it about me before I knew it about myself. Now I know it about you. That's how the gift works. We see it in each other. Cassidy nodded once, turned, started walking toward the equipment shed. She paused at the doorway and looked back. Kira was watching her the way Mercer had once watched Kira. "Thank you," Cassidy said, "for seeing something in me. Thank Dalton Mercer. He taught me how to look." Kira's voice was quiet. "Now go be the shooter he would have wanted you to be." Cassidy disappeared into the shed. 5 minutes later, she emerged fully equipped, rifle across her back. She walked toward the helipad without looking back. Kira watched her go until she disappeared into the swirling white. The walls of the training facility were covered with photographs, targets she'd hit, missions she'd completed, places that didn't officially exist, and one photograph that wasn't about her at all. Dalton Mercer, standing in front of the same facility, 20 years younger, rifle across his back. Mercer had died 3 years ago. Lung cancer. He'd refused treatment past a certain point. Said he'd had a good run. The last thing he'd told her, in the hospice facility where he'd spent his final days. "The gift doesn't belong to us, Kira. It never did. We're just caretakers, holding it until someone better comes along." What if someone better doesn't come along? They will. They always do. That's the nature of the gift. It finds the people who need it, and they find each other. Now, standing in front of his photograph, Kira understood. Cassidy would succeed today. She was sure of it. Not because she hoped, because she knew. The same way Mercer had known about her. The gift had been passed on. The legacy continued. Kira touched the photograph. "I found her," she said quietly. "Just like you found me." The radio crackled. Cassidy's voice came through, steady and calm. "Specialist in position. Beginning approach." Kira closed her eyes and listened. The storm raged on, and somewhere in the mountains, the gift lived on. Epilogue. In the official records, she doesn't exist. No name, no rank, no service number. In the stories soldiers tell each other after impossible missions, she has 100 names. The Ghost, the Mountain, the Last Volunteer. But the truest name she ever earned wasn't spoken in briefing rooms or written in classified files. It was spoken by Dalton Mercer on the last day of his life, when he looked at her and said, "Teacher." The same name he had earned. The same name that mattered, because legends don't die. They're passed on, from Mercer to Kira, from Kira to Cassidy, from Cassidy to whoever comes next. And somewhere in the mountains, where the impossible waits to be conquered, another young shooter is learning the only lesson that matters. Impossible is just another word for not yet. The end.